Howdy Clods, it's been a few months since I got my RG CubeXX, and I think I'm ready to give my final review on it, unless it explodes or something in the next few months, in which case there'll be an update on the end card. I got this handheld because I wasn't enjoying my experience with the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, video about that on the end card. You might see this as a downgrade when compared to a powerful Android device, and yes, technically it is, but in the ways that are important to me, it's much better. I think this hobby's been around long enough that devices really shouldn't be releasing in the slab form factor. I get that they're more pocketable that way, but a lot of these slab devices are large and wouldn't be pocket friendly in the first place. At the point that it can't fit in a pocket anymore, you may as well embrace the backpack lifestyle and just give it some cheeks. Before I start, I'm trying to make these videos more friendly for new people, so I'm going to define some stuff as I go, but also, if I say something that you don't understand, please comment. I will respond. Enthusiasts make the handhelds better with feedback, but new people make the hobby better by keeping it alive. So please don't hesitate to ask anything. Now, let's start with power. If you're someone buying a new retro handheld, or one for the first time, the thing you care about the most is the power. Basically, what systems it can play. Being that the Anbernic CubeXX is one of Anbernic's many, very many, like a suffocating amount of H700 chipset devices, you already know what it can play. If you're new to this, you're probably not super familiar with it, but the H700 chipset is basically the same chipset that is used in all Anbernic's XX devices. These are Linux-based handhelds, and their power cap is relatively low, but what they can play, they play very well. Almost all of Anbernic's sub $100 handhelds all peak at about PSP, Dreamcast, and N64. N64, despite its age, is pretty rough and tough to emulate perfectly, and Dreamcast and PSP run pretty well here. But if you're getting a handheld for anything past Dreamcast, then you should look into a more powerful Android device. That said, everything below the Dreamcast plays perfectly. But just because you can play PSP, Dreamcast, and below, no problem, doesn't mean that they're the best fit for the device. Let's talk about the cuboid elephant in the room here, the square screen. This is a 720 by 720 pixel display, meaning a 1:1 aspect ratio. It's a square. This means that aside from Pico 8, a fantasy console, I have a video on that on the end card, nothing will fit the screen perfectly. This was a big issue with the launch of the original version of the CubeXX. The Cube, yeah, be careful when buying one of these. The names are that similar that it's actually super confusing. If you want the Linux-based one, this one, the one that's on screen, remember, D-pad at top. If you want the Android one, it's D-pad at bottom. I don't recommend getting the Android one, as the Cube screen doesn't make sense for an Android device. The original Cube's problem was that it was a 1:1 screen, and the fact that it runs on Android. This meant that you were getting way more power than you would need for this system's target, which is stuff that's good on a 1:1 screen. The Cube can play a lot of stuff, but aside from novelty, why would you want to play Minecraft on a 1:1 screen? Anbernic heard the complaints and made a budget version that runs on Linux, and is probably the best H700 device that they've put out, aside from the screen issue. Aspect ratios are super important, and you really don't notice it being an issue until you're playing on a ratio that's a really bad fit for it. 1:1 is excellent for Pico 8, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Super Nintendo, Nintendo. That's because these systems are taller than most systems that are accounted for with other aspect ratios. Because these are 1:1, 10:9, and 8:7, they're taller than the typical 4:3 that is used by most devices. So those look much better on this device, as there's currently not many systems out there between 4:3 and 1:1. 1:1 is an excellent fit for Pico 8, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and that's about it. Pico 8 is 1:1, beautiful and perfect fit because of this. The Pico 8 community actually says that this is probably the premier Pico 8 handheld for now. GB and GBC are both 10:9, which is essentially 1:1, and without integer scaling, it's still pretty good looking. Integer scaling is basically pixel perfect, as people call it. They'll shrink the space of the game down so it's smaller, so that 1 pixel on the screen is equal to 1 pixel on your device. This is so that some things aren't stretched, and it just makes it look better, but I think 10:9 on this device is close enough to 1:1 that even with a little bit of stretching, it's not too bad. Personally, I don't mind that it's not pixel perfect just because it looks nice. SNES and NES are both 8:7. If you played these on a 4:3 ratio like you did on a TV as a kid, then the screen gets stretched. You might actually be more used to playing SNES like that. So despite the SNES and NES being intended for 4:3, they look better at 8:7, because if you put it on 4:3, circles will turn into ovals, and if you play it on its original aspect ratio, circles are circles. So it's another easy get for the CubeXX because it actually looks pretty good on this because it's a little bit different than 4:3. The medium good fits are 4:3 and 3:2, which are N64 N64, PS1, and most Sega systems. These are systems that are wider than they are tall, so they will have bars at the top and bottom that are pretty sizable. I'd suggest using a border or overlay for these. Having a system logo in place of the black bars can make it a bit more tolerable, but I'm someone who has multiple of these handhelds, and I'm not really super picky about my 4.3 experience. I just don't play that much 4.3. The worst fit is, of course, 16:9. While I was able to enjoy PSP just fine, it was microscopic. But in an interesting twist, the RG CubeXX does have a perfect secret fit, and that's the 14:9 WonderSwan, and it should, in theory, be terribly small. And it is, but the WonderSwan is a system that was used both vertical and horizontal. For Swan games, I set up a button to rotate the screen. That means if I play Digimon, I can use the 14:9 landscape, and if I swap to Gunpei, it's 9:14 vertically, and both screens are the same size. Neither are shrunk because of the 1:1 screen. People say that these ratios are bad on this handheld, 4:3, 3:2, 16:9, and 14:9, and that makes it supposedly not worth getting. But I have an RG 35XX, which is a 3.5 screen. That's what the 35 means. It means 3.5 inch screen. The screen width is the same as the screen width of the Cube. So despite being different sizes, they're the same horizontally. They're both 2.8 inches wide. That means that these games aren't any smaller than what you're experiencing on any other device. That's right. As long as your device is 4.3 and 3.5 inch screen, then this will display games at the same exact size, except GBC, GB, Pico 8, SNES, and NES, which will all be a little bigger. So in reality, this 1:1 screen displays more games in the same or greater quality than a 3.5 inch 4.3 handheld peer. But 4.3 screens that are bigger than 3.5 inches diagonal will be wider than the Cube, so these will still display the majority better. The CubeX still has them beat on height, so if you super care about Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Pico 8, then this handheld will have a bigger square ratio up until a 4.3 device that is 7 inches diagonal. So don't worry about the screen size. Everything but DS is the same size here as it is on the majority of Anbernic handhelds. Lastly, DS, our extra special babe that deserves extra special attention. Games ran perfectly fine, but I didn't try that many. I played Pokemon Conquest, not a fan. I like tactical RPGs, just not this one. But since the screen is 1:1, you can fit both DS screens, but they will be small. It's a total ratio of 3:4, which is just 4:3 rotated 90 degrees clockwise. Not a ton of shrinkage, but still hard to see stuff. The CubeXX also isn't a touchscreen, so you control a cursor with right stick and you click it to tap. This sucks. But most DS games don't use touch that much. Many games have button alternatives. I ended up having it only display one screen at a time, and then I used a button to swap the focus screen from top to bottom. For RPGs, this works perfectly fine, but I would prefer more scaling options on the Cube. I'd like to be able to shrink the bottom screen, and then that way I can make the top screen bigger. My suggestion for DS players is to get the Magic X handheld, which will be a dedicated device. It will be your DS machine, or use a 16:9 Android device with touch. 16:9 means that the top screen will be on the left, and the bottom on the right, but smaller. This functions much better if you need touch. If the game entirely relies on touch like Cookie Mama, then the Magic X device or just your smartphone would be better. Also, Android has an accelerometer and the Cube doesn't, so specific motion titles won't work on it like WarioWare Twisted. Although you might be able to map accelerometers into the L and R buttons and you can just press those to rotate. Overall, this system is great for Pico 8, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, SNES, NES, and WonderSwan. It's good for N64, PS1, and Sega systems, just okay for GBA and DS, and terrible for PSP. But its PSP screen is still technically the same size as the RG35XX, so if you were comparing it to the other 35 size screens or smaller, it's the same experience. The real thing that the CubeXX excels at is just its form factor. It's most of why I got it. This is the most comfortable handheld I have played ever. I have a GBA, GBC, Switches 1 and 2, DS, 3DS, 2DS, PSP, PS Vita, an RG28XX, a RG Nano, and a Retroid Pocket 3. This is the most comfortable one out of all of those. The CubeXX is more comfortable than every system I've ever touched. The system is a perfect and comfortable fit for my hands. I can easily reach all of the controls, and the ergonomic shape not only perfectly fits into my hand, it's also comfortable if I move my hand down for long-term analog use. It has a weight to it, but it's not heavy. It can be a little big, too big for my pockets, but it's not so big that it won't easily fit into bags, purses, fanny packs, and backpacks. I'm not the only one who thinks this is a comfy system too. Recently, it was voted the most comfortable handheld by r/SBC Gaming, a subreddit dedicated to gaming on single-board computers. If you don't know, your phone and handhelds are SBCs. But yeah, it's super popular with that community too, just for the comfort. So let's talk about the physical features. The buttons are much larger than my old Retroid device. They're about the same size as the Switch 2's buttons, which is a little smaller than an Xbox controller. They're big enough to be comfy and soft pressing enough to not leave indents in the thumb. The analog sticks look to be aftermarket Switch 1 sticks, which are suitable for this device's capabilities. You aren't playing Call of Duty on this, so you don't need big or tall sticks. The only uncomfortable aspect of this device is the sticks, and that's just because they're positioning, but I'm not even playing that much PS1. You might, and even then, most PS1 games don't use analog sticks. It doesn't have any triggers, it's 4 bumpers instead. You might be bummed out by that, but you don't want triggers on a retro handheld. Triggers have more travel than a bumper, which means it takes longer before the input is accepted. Since this doesn't play any systems that would have triggers, it doesn't need them. The only thing that I would say that you would probably want triggers for is racing games. I think having a trigger on a racing game would probably be really good. But the bumpers are also nearly silent and soft, but with a heavily laser-etched texture. It's not abrasive, but it gives a little bit of extra grip. Most games I play aren't using L and R2, so these are usually left for things like fast forward or GBC palette swapping. L and R1 are a bit too small for my liking, but they work. The D-pad is a disc D-pad, which I thought I was going to hate. I'm glad I took the risk though. This is a very comfortable D-pad, since it's not as bowl-shaped as the Genesis pad, and some people don't like that it's not as bowl-shaped. I like that it's almost flat. All the edges are rounded and soft too. The select and start buttons are on the bottom right. I prefer the Switch style where they're at the tops of the top left and top right of the screen. These are also clicky, but not loud. There's a macro button at the bottom left, clicky, but quiet. Downfiring speakers, a big effing womp womp, but it's still better than backfiring. It is crazy to me that there are devices releasing with backfiring speakers. I cannot imagine you being more obnoxious with that. I cannot imagine a more obnoxious way to play games. Just like, imagine like being in like a nail salon or something like that and just playing your Game Boy and the sound is coming out of the back. How annoying is it that it's louder for everyone else but quieter for you? Don't get a backfiring speaker. Be respectful of the people around you. Anyway, 2 SD slots, nothing to say here. Headphone jack in the middle so it's out of the way. Top has HDMI out mini, a reset button, volume up and down, and they can be reached comfortably with the left hand, and power that's an absolute pain in the tuchus to press. It's receded into the device and it's super small. You won't press it by accident, but I also hate pressing it on purpose because of how hard it is to press. Finally, USB-C for power and data. It's only 5-volt charging, which is slow charging USB-C. You may as well put a USB micro on it, Anbernic. It's that out of date. If this had fast charging, its battery would take maybe an hour to charge. Right now, it's more like an hour and a half, which I guess is not terrible, but you know, it's not ideal either. Faster, better. The back of the device has a friend that I put there, and you can see the ergonomics more clearly. Lots of devices are adding butts, but this one is big. It's not just a small ball at the bottom. This one is more of a pill controller shape with a higher top. I don't know how to really phrase it. It just feels better though. It's more potato shaped, I guess. The inner edges where your middle fingers rest are also laser etched like the bumpers. It's a very small and fine texture that feels soft on the hands but not abrasive like sandpaper. I feel zero need or urge to get a grip for this handheld. It's nearly perfect, or close enough that I don't feel that the small increase from a grip would be quality of life improving enough to warrant the spend. Other features include Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and RGB gamer lighting around the sticks. Personally, you couldn't pay me to give a f about RGB lighting on a handheld, and with how slow the charging is, I don't want anything burning up extra battery. Make the system have purple or pink accents, and we'll talk. For me, this is the ultimate home handheld device. It's very Switch coded. I do wish the community would get more behind this device though. There needs to be a lot more customization options out there on sites like Etsy. I want replaceable sticks, buttons, and a D-pad. Unfortunately, the community just isn't there yet. So whatever you bought is what you're stuck with. I also hate that it doesn't have a lanyard loop. Every handheld should have a lanyard loop. As for CFW, I've tried all the big ones. So Stock, Nully, and MuOS. In the end, I settled on Nully. Stock is perfectly fine, but it was missing some options. Moonlight is terrible on Stock, no port master. MuOS has those, but its video out integration and Pico 8 installation suck and are annoying. Nully takes forever to boot and is lacking a lot of the tools and additional non-gaming features from other systems, but you might like that. It's a more gaming-focused operating system. Like Anbernic devices, reviews, every CFW was nearly perfect, but lacking one thing or the other. Nully had the most of what I expect to use, and I absolutely love Bottasera's layout. It's just perfect. I know Moo has themes, and I liked the cat one and the Hoenn Pokemon one, but Nully had better Pico 8 installation and HDMI support. Sorry, Moo OS fans. But I do use Moo OS on one of my other handhelds because of the music player that comes with it. It's a pretty good music player, but you're not using the CubeXX as a music player. It's too big for that. The biggest change this device had on my gaming habits was just the frequency at which I play now, and that I play a lot more Pico 8, GB, and GBC, and SNES now. This is the first device I got that got me to play more games. The Retroid Pocket 3 Plus was an uncomfortable and sometimes painful brick. The buttons were really small and just, it hurt, and the slab being too uncomfortable. The RG Nano was uncomfortably small, and its buttons were also uncomfortable. The RG35XX I have didn't have Wi-Fi, so no retro achievements, and I really like retro achievements. And the RG28XX was also too small, but the RG28XX is something I still use a lot just because it's pocket friendly. If you're new to this stuff, the RG28XX is where I would say that you should start, or the Miyu A30 Mini, as well, probably the Miyu A30 Mini if you're curious about retro achievements. But the RG28XX is the cheapest device on the market that's still good. It's just 30 bucks, and it's so good. It's so good and perfect for someone who just wants to play Game Boy on the go. Now, final thoughts. The CubeXX is perfect for me, but I understand that many, if not most, won't get over that screen. For the average person, I'd say this is like a high 7 out of 10. For me, it's like a 9 out of 10. The only thing negatively impacting it for me is that stock OS still sucks. Get rid of the Game Rubes tab already. Like, Wolfden complained about this like 3 years ago. The Game Rube tabs is going to turn people away from this hobby because they're going to click it thinking that's where they're supposed to play the games, and then they click it, and it turns out everything runs like garbage. Just leave only the RA Games tab. Out-of-box experience was still just okay. You still need to know how to use a PC, then some minor nitpicks. For what it does and what it's intended to do, nearly perfect. Keep in mind, I'm rating this based on how it stacks up to other Linux-based handhelds and what Linux-based handhelds are capable of at this time. This hobby has a new device releasing every week, so this video could be old news the day it comes out. It probably already is old news. Thanks for watching either way, and make sure to tip your YouTuber. I accept likes and subscribes, and I'll see you all later. Bye!